Entropy in science and the concept of effort in work. One of the tasks facing society remains to connect the science of the West with the wisdom of the East. This means that we have to connect the ideas and structure of our work by making parallels with similar scientific ideas that exist today. Such an example can be made of the word entropy, the original Greek meaning as turning inward. Science believes the universe is gradually running down, the sun is getting cooler, the rotation of the earth is becoming more sluggish, and consequently, the moon is becoming more and more distant. The ultimate picture is a world of decay where no interchange of energy can take place, such as obviously exist at present. For example, the heat of the sun warms up the Earth and other planets surrounding it. Work on self, in contrast, teaches that we live in a growing universe and not a dying one. However, let's not dwell on this for the moment, but try instead to focus attention upon that word entropy from a psychological point of view. Bear in mind that entropy increases in any interchange of energy between two bodies, such as a hot kettle and a cold kettle of water placed side by side. Gradually, the kettles become of the same temperature, and then entropy is achieved, there being no further interchange of that form of energy that we call heat. Similarly, if you have an electric battery and connect the negative and positive poles with a wire causing resistance, you soon exhaust the available current. The battery gets played out and no energy travels from one pole to the other. The next concept of entropy lies between order and disorder. From this point of view, an increase of entropy means increased disorder among particles forming the matter concerned. For example, a metal clock is a machine that has order, an orderly arrangement of its parts. However, supposing we were to place that clock into a temperature of several thousand degrees, then all the metal will melt, all the atoms and molecules would begin to become disordered, and the clock would cease to exist as an ordered mechanism. The clock disappears and is replaced by a disorderly motion of all its parts in terms of molecules and atoms. Schrödinger uses an example, among others, of what increasing entropy means, which I well know, to the effect that if you leave your books and papers on the table without tidying them up, you will get increasing entropy, increasing disorder, and certainly one can get into that state in which maximum entropy sets in, leaving everything in a total muddle. See What is Life by Erwin Schrödinger, published by the Cambridge University Press. So, taking then entropy from the standpoint of order and disorder, then trying to connect it with what we might term psychological entropy. We know probably that if one does not arrange their thoughts now and then, make an effort to formulate them, our thoughts scatter into increasing disorder, and this means increasing entropy. Since the less arranged and the more disordered any state of nature is, means physically increasing entropy of the state, we can, I believe, transfer this idea to the psychological realm and perhaps understand it better. For this reason, the formulation of one's thoughts, which the work so often insists upon, can be compared with an effort in the direction of decreasing entropy in oneself. On the other hand, never getting anything clear in one's mind, never saying, "Now what am I up to?" or "What do I really think? What does this mean?" can be compared with an increase in entropy, an increasing disorder of our psychological or inner world. Schrödinger shows how life and its material basis is highly organized and demonstrates an order that is not found in ordinary physical systems, in ordinary matter. It is perhaps unnecessary that this should be pointed out, because we must have all had the same idea when looking at a seed changing into a plant. However, it is a real step forward for science, which rarely faces all of the facts. Life is characterized then by a very high degree of order, which is handed on by the germ or seeds with ordered results, such as plants, trees, and human bodies, which is quite different from unorganized matter, such as stones, soils, minerals, and so on. Put quite simply, it means that scientists are becoming more aware that there is an ordered force at the basis of life, which arranges material particles in a definite way, then hands down this order from generation to generation, and so is quite distinct from the average rules that apply to non-living matter. From a psychological perspective, we can ask a question. Supposing that you satisfy every desire, supposing that you identify with everything, supposing, in short, that you never work on yourself in any way at all, but just live each moment to the maximum, do you think your psychological entropy would increase or decrease? We can assume that it would increase, and you will become harder and harder to please, reaching in every direction a kind of satiety, until you become, so to speak, fed up with everything. This we are taking as the psychological equivalent of physical entropy, as when a hot and cold kettle reach a common temperature and no further interchange of heat takes place between them. We all have a multitude of psychological sides to us, which are satisfied in different ways, and the question really is extremely complex. However, we could agree that, taking the instinctive center by example, starvation decreases entropy, whereas overeating increases it, bringing on a state of satiety. The work teaches that we have to make effort on ourselves in many different ways, the reason being that effort tends to decrease entropy, as simply doing whatever we want to increases entropy. Take, for example, the formulation of one's thoughts, which requires a definite kind of effort. Do we tend to feel fresher after it all or not? Do we feel more available energy or not? We would probably all agree that you tend to feel more energy and feel more alive, which means that we have decreased entropy within and so have more available energy to give out or use. However, supposing that we are bored to death, fed up, satiated with food, sex, lethargy, substance abuse, and so on. Suppose that we simply live as best we can without ever trying to understand our role or take hold of anything, and simply drift from moment to moment. Then we are probably increasing psychological entropy, going more and more to sleep, becoming more and more mechanical in a work sense, and therefore subject to the random laws of chance and happenstance. Increasing psychological entropy can be thought of as equivalent to increasing paralysis in our psychic states. You know what happens to us all unless we work on ourselves or exercise the power of creation and self-expression. We eventually arrive at a state where we let everything go, in which we can make no real effort of attention and cannot concentrate, but really daydream or fantasize instead, failing to apply ourselves to anything, and so cannot take in any new impressions, growing more and more delusional, paranoid, schizophrenic, and haunted. We never try to learn anything new, and instead of being horrified by our state of ignorance, we simply drift along with the stream of life. The keynote of this work is to rouse oneself from sleep of this kind. Therefore, in the parallel between physical entropy and psychological entropy, the keynote of work is to decrease entropy in ourselves through certain definite effort and particular shocks, which ordinarily we would never think of making. All effort, of course, involves a certain sacrifice. Supposing I were to sit down and then get hold of some particularly difficult text, what do I have to sacrifice? I have to sacrifice my great desire to be lazy and do nothing instead. This means that the energy that would ordinarily be employed in being lazy, comfortable, and sleepy is forced into a new channel through effort, so leading to the taking in of new impressions. Will entropy here be increased or decreased? I should have more available energy to use afterwards by this act. The work teaches that whatever we do mechanically is lost forever, and whatever we do consciously remains with us. Making an effort is, relatively speaking, doing something more consciously, which will yield force and therefore decrease entropy. Going with yourself mechanically, drifting from day to day, will take energy from you and increase entropy. In fact, in that situation, we have no right to say that we are alive, and cannot really say that we are living our life, but should rather say that our life is living us. The word sacrifice is here mentioned because all effort involves the sacrifice of something, as for example, when we are negative with someone and make the effort not to identify with that. This is a sacrifice. It is a sacrifice of energy that would otherwise go into being negative, and if at the same time we are able to remember aim in connection with this particular and most dangerous form of negative emotion, then energy will go into maintaining that aim and to those eyes that wish instead to grow. Which is a good kind of effort to make, and we are only taking 1 or 2 examples here of those efforts taught by the work from its practical side. Taking now some of the symbols of sacrifice that exist historically from the past, chiefly as religious allegories, let's think of them with regard to the idea of effort that decreases the state of entropy, releasing new force and new energy. There is first of all the symbol of Christ upon the cross, which gave tremendous force to the world at that time. There is also another symbol belonging to the same period, but more easy to understand to begin with, the symbol behind Mithraism, the religion that spread across Europe before Christianity overcame it. In the symbolism available on plaques and statuary at the British Museum and elsewhere, you find a god, not on the cross, but mounted on a bull into which he is driving a dagger, and from its blood come wheat and other sustenance useful in sustaining life. This is the symbol of sacrificing our animal side, where the underlying idea is to decrease entropy, to transform energy from a lower to a higher level. Because if you always satisfy your basic instincts like an animal, then you cannot expect energy to transform itself into anything for a higher level. In this work we have another symbol, which meets us at the outset, our first conscious shock. This is the transformation of energy brought about by shock through effort. Work does not begin with our instincts and appetites, but with thoughts, feelings, forms of identifying, forms of imagination, negative emotions, internal considering, and so on. The work says that these are the first efforts or sacrifices to be made before anything further can be done. The second conscious shock lies in a different place. However, this can be left to later commentary, because we must initially know what the first conscious shock is, and that takes many years of continual fresh experience, new insights, and new ways of giving it to ourselves. Work does not start with the bull of Mithra, our animal instincts. It starts with our psychological selves rather than the animal within us. If we are able to change in our psychology, then the animal will begin to change too, or rather, we will begin to see how the animal in us must change and become no more the savage beast, but a useful creature with whom we can live in reasonable peace without any feeling of contradiction. A time certainly comes when we have to know our inner animals, to go right into their presence so as to discern their meaning. This teaching, however, belongs later, and at present we can simply begin to see this other side of ourselves, that psychological being that we do not think that we are, the imaginary person acquired through experience that has to be broken up. Notice that the first conscious shock gives increased energy and therefore decreases entropy, because energy called H48 becomes transformed into the energy known as H24, which is 30,000 times more powerful, 30,000 times quicker, 30,000 times more understanding and subtle. This again is transformed into ch12, which is still higher and infinitely more subtle, full of meaning, infinitely more receptive and understanding, extensively richer and more sensitive. We can see that the idea of decreasing entropy is demonstrated from work in terms of that first conscious shock which increases energy in us and so diminishes entropy, satiety, or sleep. Returning in closing to the idea of sacrifice, which is connected with effort, we know the work says there are endless useless forms of sacrifice. People think they have something to sacrifice, and even imagine they are sacrificing themselves when they are not doing anything of the kind. For this reason, the work speaks very harshly about sacrifice at first. Sentimental individuals are always willing to sacrifice everything. What do they mean, however, by sacrifice? They have nothing to sacrifice. It is all imagination. There is only one thing that we can sacrifice at present, and that is our suffering. Many people hearing this response walk away, like that rich young man in the Gospels who was so identified with his possessions, his merits, and his legal sinlessness, who, asking Christ how he could gain eternal life, was told, "Go, sell that thou hast, and give to the poor, and thou shalt have treasure in heaven, and come follow me." See Matthew chapter 19, verse 21. Here indeed we have something to sacrifice, and it begins with sacrificing our pictures of ourselves, our imaginary I and false personality, our eminent virtue and extraordinary merits that we cling so fastly to and with which we are so identified. The work teaches more than this, however, if we reflect upon it. Take the startling phrase that we have to sacrifice our suffering. Have you noticed how self-pity increases entropy rapidly? Do you have more energy to work through self-pity? Can you recall what the Christ said when his disciples asked him, "Lord, increase our faith"? He told them the parable about simply doing what you have to do, without any sense of unusual merit or suffering garnished with any sense of self-pity. Who is there of you, having a servant ploughing or keeping sheep, that will say unto him, when he is come in from the field, "Come straightway and sit down to meat"? And will not rather say unto him, "Make ready wherewith I may sup, and gird thyself and serve me, till I have eaten and drunken, and afterward thou shalt eat and drink"? Doth he thank the servant because he did the things that were commanded? Even so ye also, when ye shall have done all the things that are commanded you, say, "We are unprofitable servants. We have done that which it was our duty to do." See Luke chapter 17, verses 7 to 10. Here, one might say that by faith is meant that which decreases entropy and frees energies that otherwise would suffocate us by flooding into the channels of self-merit, self-pity, appetite, sloth, and negative states. Only if we were to use this idea would the question then become, "Lord, how can we decrease our entropy?" Do not we derive much of our ordinary sense of I from making efforts with suffering? If that is indeed the case, then that is a bad sense of I to work from. How indeed we often feel we have toiled, and how much we feel we have suffered in silence, that we never get the appreciation we feel owing to us. We sing many songs to ourselves, all of which increases entropy, and all this is the field of sacrifice that we are told to enter and work in to begin with, because it is the psychological self that has to change first. It is a wonderful thing when the psychological begins to change in you. It is wonderful because you feel an entirely new access of energy. Begin to escape from the limitations you have unconsciously set for yourself. Begin to pass beyond those barriers that your attitudes have fashioned, to escape from this narrow little place in which you have so tightly and respectably lived. You begin to see the other side, this dark side. You begin to let a ray of light into that inner darkness. You begin to open other rooms in your house. You begin to be able to move about freely inside yourself. All this increases energy, and it decreases entropy. But we must find examples for ourselves from our individual work and observations. We must each find a clear example that we can be quite certain about, and of which we can see the practical result without quibble, doubt, or argument. The trouble is that people go on working without getting a clear example through self-observation of, say, a negative thought, and so live in obscurity as to what this is all about. For this reason, P.D. Ouspensky would say, "I want examples, not theoretical talk. Give me a good example of self-observation or a moment of work on yourself, a moment of real effort consciously made." This is quite possible for everyone. To do this is far better than to write long theoretical commentaries on what self-observation is or should be, and what mechanical reactions mean, or what sleep means. Once we have a good work memory for actual work done by ourselves, on ourselves, and from ourselves, we will then have no difficulty in understanding that every genuine work effort increases energy and so decreases entropy. All great religions with real esoteric teaching behind them have always, as their aim, certain kinds of effort that a person can and should make in their lifetime, without the making of which someone is not ascended in an esoteric sense. That hot kettle alluded to previously, if it were able to give itself shocks, would get hotter and hotter, increasing its energy while it still gives out energy. Kettles cannot do this, of course, but esotericism says that people can, by giving themselves the right shocks at the right times, and so reach an entirely different level of energy. Not automatons or cyborgs that run down early in life and become a long-dead person, but someone seeking to become conscious, a person who, by deliberate choice, puts themselves in the way of inner development, inner transformation, in accordance with a teaching that has come from those who have gone that way before.